Every game programming hobbyist knows that the hardest thing in coding is not mechanics like pathfinding or shaders, whatever they are, but it's finishing the damn game. You know how it is. You have a spark of inspiration, you want to make a certain game or want to try out a new coding concept. You open your laptop and start typing like crazy. In the first days everything goes smoothly. No big problems, good progress, and your brain is sizzling with creativity. And then after 1 or 2 weeks, the energy begins to wane. Bugs appear, your daily life needs attention. And then you realize you haven't worked on your game for several days. And you need to fix this issue but don't really want to. And it begins to feel like work, but the game is nowhere near complete. So you stop working on the project, thinking that you'll come back to it later, but you never do. And the game becomes another permanent resident of the graveyard of unfinished games. It's not that I never complete a game, but the majority of my projects never see the light of day. That's why I've come up with this idea. I will create a game that is a finished product from the start. Every time I work on it, I must leave it a playable product. I can never break the game. That means that whenever I decide to stop working on the code, the game is complete. It doesn't have to be complex or even very good, as long as it is unbroken. I don't have an end goal in mind or a big to-do list. Is this going to work? I don't know. I can think of a few drawbacks of this approach, but it's worth a try. We'll find out in this devlog series. In all fairness, when you start a new game, you don't have a finished game right away. The goal is to make a playable game as quickly as possible. The first iteration of the game will probably take the longest, because you're starting from scratch. In this phase, when you're excited and full of energy, that's not going to be a problem. Here's my simple definition of a game. The user can play the game and based on his or her actions, the game can be won or lost. My favorite genre to make is RPGs or roguelikes. I've made quite a few and some were even finished. The problem with roguelikes is they tend to get big very fast. If I make a wishlist for all the features that I want in a roguelike, it will be quite a large document. It will take months to make. I think this genre will be perfect for my experiment. Since I've made RPGs before, this time I wanted to do something different. I've never really tried to make a game in isometric view, so why not start now? What had always held me back was the artwork. Especially the animations in isometric view are impossible for my limited drawing skills. I figured that if I would set my expectations really low, I could make something work. But first I had to decide on the shape of the isometric tile. The diagonal lines are 2 to 1. For every pixel in the vertical direction, it goes 2 pixels sideways. There are several ways to draw an isometric tile. The one with 4 pixels at the high and low corner aligns perfectly with itself. I've decided to make every tile an isometric cube. That way you can easily show depth. These are my first tries. Then I figured that I wanted outlines on the tiles, since I want the movement in the game tile-based. If you use this tile shape with an outline, you get a double line, which I didn't like. So I changed the shape of the tile to this perfectly symmetrical shape. This tile needs to overlap in order to get the alignment right. That way you get only one line between the tiles. Once I had decided on the size and shape of the cubes, I made this small isometric world. Now I needed someone to live in this world. First I tried to create a human-looking person in isometric view, which failed completely. So I decided to make the player basically a rectangle with eyes. I think this person's name could be Bob. Let's call him Bob. Now I needed to move Bob around. At first I tried keyboard movement. I could use normal movement in the direction of the arrow keys, but it doesn't make much sense. Everything is positioned on diagonals. Therefore it's more logical to make the movement on the diagonal axis as well. I've tried up for the northeast direction, down for the southwest, left for northwest and right for southeast, which isn't very intuitive. It worked fine for me, but my playtesters, my wife and son, didn't like it. Of course, people can get used to these controls, but I didn't want to scare off potential players with counterintuitive controls. So I switched to mouse input. Using the mouse for RPGs probably makes more sense anyway. It has only one disadvantage. It's a bit harder to implement. First I had to determine where the mouse click lands on the isometric grid. The isometric grid is rotated 45 degrees relative to the normal screen coordinates. There are probably more ways to tackle this. I decided to check the mouse coordinate with every diagonal line. I had to dust off my math skills, but in the end it wasn't too difficult. Now I had the position where the player wanted to go. Internally, the grid of the world is just a normal position grid with rows and columns. I had to use A-star pathfinding for this. Fortunately, I had done this many times before. After 30 minutes of furious typing and bug fixing, Bob could move around. Time to do some quick aesthetic upgrades. I made an extra sprite so Bob could look up, and I made it so that the tiles in the map could be mirrored. Now Bob can look in 4 directions. Also, I made it that blocks get transparent when Bob moves behind them. Like I said earlier, to me a game is something that you can win or lose. In order to make this a game, I had to implement a win and lose condition. I think that Bob would like to collect stuff, so I placed some candy on the map. You have to collect all candy to win. Then I gave Bob a limited amount of moves. If you run out of moves before you collect all candy, you lose. There you go, a complete game. Granted, it's not a very exciting game. It's only interesting for about 20 seconds. But it works, and hopefully it will get better as I add more to it. As long as I don't break it. This game is playable on my itch.io page, the link is in the description, and with every video the game will be updated. I don't know how long this series is going to be. I certainly don't have a wish or to-do list, since that would defeat the whole purpose of this experiment. Hopefully you've enjoyed this and you'll come back for the next video.